Hey guys, Chad here with the Reptile Rangers. Now, check this out. We're at the Kernersville Reptile Zoo today. We've had a lot of people write us in about different subjects, different topics, things they want us to talk about and film about, whether things that we have here at the zoo, answering questions, medical issues, how to deal with it, how to treat it. We've taken all kinds of topics in, okay? One that I'm going to cover today is one that is the bane of any reptile breeder, especially snake breeders' existence, or even a snake keeper. It doesn't even have to be a breeder, but especially breeders that have big collections of ball pythons, maybe colubrids, Burmese, things like that, and it is snake mites. All right, mites are the bane of any reptile keeper's existence. Now, it's not the end of the world like some of these forums would make it out to be. Oh my God, you got snake mites, your animals are going to die. Please shut up. Now, it's not that big of a deal, okay? Yes, they're an absolute pain in the butt. They're a pain in the butt to get rid of. They're hard to deal with. They're very easy to get. And we're going to go over all kinds of the reasons why you get them, how you can get them, how you can get rid of them. I'm not going to give you some of the treatment methods, kind of like some of the other medical things that we've done before. I'm not going to give you some of the stuff that we have created. We have created actual treatment for them, and I'm not going to tell you that over a video, you know, for the sake of it killing one of your animals. And not doing the appropriate prescription or the appropriate amount, things like that. But I'm going to tell you some other ways to be able to take care of them, how your animal catches them. And it's not just snakes; it's also lizards. There's lizard mites. But tell you what, this right here is snake mites, lizard mites, essentially reptile mites. So let's get started. Come on. Okay, so let's start with snake mites. Okay, now. Got a ball python here, just a normal, average, everyday ball python. All right, these guys are notorious for getting snake mites. Now, there's many reasons why snake mites can happen. Okay, so number one would be just nasty, dirty bedding that's never clean, wet environment, moist, overflow of water dishes, and too much humidity. Remember, we talked in respiratory infections. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. Respiratory infections. Humidity can be a very bad thing. If you do too much, you can cause respiratory infection, you can cause snake mites, you can cause all kinds of things, okay? Now, you need to remember this, okay? Now, too much water. Now, understand this. Snake mites, or mites in general, lay their eggs in warm, moist areas. Now, they also congregate to those warm, moist areas. Now, a snake mite essentially goes under the scales, around the eyes, into the lips. With pythons and certain vipers, that's pit vipers, they'll go into the heat pits as well. They'll go hide out in there. Anywhere where there's a warm, moist area. Now, what they do is they essentially live off the fluids of the animal or the blood. It's both. So when they're inside of the eyes, they're not so much taking the blood as they're taking the fluids, okay? When they get up underneath the scales, which you'll see these raised scales with these little black mites up under there, what they're doing is they're getting the blood. It's kind of like a tick or a flea going after the flesh or the blood, okay? Now, with snake mites are contracted from multiple different areas, one being nasty, dirty bedding, wet bedding that is never cleaned. Another one is kind of like my buddy here behind me with this iguana here in the zoo. We have these nice, big, massive logs and things like that. And people talk about, oh, well, you can't take things from the wild and put it into the pen. Well, that's incorrect, and it's just another one of those stupid things that you're going to read online, okay? Yes, you can use natural sticks, natural rocks. With naturalistic housing items, it's not manufacturally created plastic or foam or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying that stuff is bad. It's expensive, okay? And some of these manufacturing companies, they make some really nice stuff. But hey, free is better, right? Cheap and free. Okay, so cheap and free works even better. But here's kind of one of the things that comes with natural stuff that's untreated or considered untreated wood, untreated rocks, is you have the bugs. Okay, now there's a couple of ways that you can deal with your natural housing items and not have to buy something from the store that's already been treated or it was plastically preformed, whatever the case may be, something that was not just coming straight out of nature. Now, when you take a log, you take a stick, you take a rock, there's two ways of doing this and actually treating it and doing what's called a curing process. Curing your wood, like these sticks right here, the two-part process, or the two processes you can do, one is a bleaching process. But that's a 3-day process. It takes 72 hours to do so. Bleaching, you would have to have a vat or a bin big enough to be able to put whatever it is that you're putting in the housing, into the enclosure, okay? You put it in straight bleach for 24 hours, okay? And then you have to take the housing item out, you dump the bleach out, you fill that vat or bin back up with straight water, you put the housing item back in there, and it soaks for another 24 hours. Essentially what you're doing is you're soaking the bleach out of it now. Then you dump the water, and then you fill it back up again for another 24 hours to make sure that you get all the bleach out, because yes, bleach can be very, very harmful to these guys, especially if they absorb it through the skin, if they drink it, even if they breathe it, if there's any in there and there's still that odor or still the vapors that's in there from a hard bleach or a bleaching compound. Now, the easiest way, and not everybody has access to something like this, but there's several ways that you can do it, okay? The easiest way to do it is called cooking. Now, cooking your housing items would essentially be putting your housing item in the oven, 200 degrees for 2 hours, and it cures and kills everything on that housing item, okay? It's beautiful, perfect way to do it. Now, you cannot do it obviously with plastic. Plastic is going to melt. And we're talking natural wood like logs, sticks, limbs, things like that, and we're talking rocks that you may find in a river or quarry or something along that line. It's a curing process. Now, the bigger it goes, the less most people have access to. Nobody has a pizza oven, or very few people have something that's long enough to be able to run that through long ways. Now, essentially what you would do is you would take and do what's called fire hardening. If you can get a fire big enough, okay, and you can lay it down over a grate and you can get it hot enough, you can do the exact same concept. However, you can cook that thing at over 200 degrees for 2 hours. It'll kill every parasite on it. That's a great way of curing these things, okay? So putting them in there after you cure them, it's wonderful. And remember, who doesn't like free? Yeah, we all do. Okay, now, more about snake mites. Snake mites, lizard mites, have a gestation period of about 10 days. So when we have the issue of, man, I sprayed them down with that natural chemistry, I sprayed them down with the stuff that I bought from PetSmart, Petco, and it killed the mites, and it wasn't but a few days later, and I had mites all over again. Well, the problem is, natural chemistry and a lot of the chemicals that you buy from Petco, PetSmart, Pets Plus Plus, PetSense, they don't kill mite eggs. A lot of times it won't even kill the adults completely, okay? Now, some of the ways behind that is it's been created in such a way that it's safe for the snake. It's not totally harmful to the snake itself. But the problem is mite eggs are impervious to most of household chemicals, and especially the stuff that's been created to kill snake mites. So how do you deal with it? All right, now, here's some of the ways that we deal with snake mites, okay? Snake mites. What we'll do is for 15 days straight, and again, this is the bane of any reptile owner's existence, and this is where it's a pain in the butt process. It's not over dramatic. It's not really that big of a deal. It's just simply the elimination of the mites is a pain in the butt because it's a multi-day process, okay? But for 15 days, we will take and we will teach to soak the snake for an hour or two in nice bathtub warm water, okay? What happens is the snake will actually, and they naturally go to water. Understand, in the wild, when they have snake mites, they will naturally go sit in pools of water. Even inside of maybe your habitat, they'll sit in the water dish a whole lot more. Just because they're sitting in the water dish, no, does not mean they have snake mites. Maybe it's too hot. Maybe some of these animals do actually enjoy the water. But in some cases, when these animals do have mites, they tend to congregate to water sources because they can naturally drown them. It's a natural method of extermination, okay? So we will take and put these animals in bathtub warm water in a secure enclosure or a secure container that they cannot get out of. They can still breathe, but their bodies are submerged underwater. They can get their bodies submerged underwater, and we'll leave them in there for several hours. It drowns the mites. Okay, now, mites do have a tendency to travel and bounce from habitat to habitat to habitat. That's why even though breeding rack systems saves you a lot of space, you can have a lot of animals in one space. The problem is when one snake has mites, most of the time, all the rest of the tubs are typically going to end up with mites because those things bounce from tub to tub to tub, or enclosure to enclosure to enclosure, okay? So when you have that situation go on, you take and you soak them, okay? Now, with snake mites, you can take all of your housing items out. Remember, anything that's plastic, you can clean down. You can use that bleach. You can use a heavier duty chemical cleaner to clean plastics and the fake stuff that you would buy from some pet store. Now, your natural stuff, it's a simple process. Remember, 200 degrees, 2 hours, it'll kill everything on it, okay? Now, there is pre-treating around each one of your enclosures, each one of your tubs, whatever the case may be. You can use regular pesticides. You can use whatever you want to use as like a pre-treatment around the enclosures, not inside of the enclosures. Because what it'll do is, as any mites go out of the habitat trying to go to another one, if they try and come back across, then it'll have that residual effect. Pest strips, a lot of people talk about pest strips. You can put pest strips out and around the outside of your enclosures. And sometimes those mites are naturally attracted to those. They'll get stuck to them, or they'll just get on it and they'll die due to the chemicals from that. That's another way that you can do outside of the enclosure to pre-treat, to make sure that they don't go from pen to pen to pen or come back to your pen. Now, remember, just because you drown the eggs, just because you drown the mites that's physically on that animal, it may have laid eggs somewhere inside of that pen. Well, if you're not using a chemical, something like what we created, an actual treatment that we created, what we created will kill the eggs, it'll kill the mites, and it also has a residual effect. But like I said, I'm not going to talk about that on this because I don't want people going out killing their animals. Because for baby snakes, if you don't do it carefully, you will kill a baby snake just like that. So you have to be very, very vigilant about how you deal with stuff like this. But there are a lot less chemicalistic and very easy ways to be able to eliminate mites, even though it's a pain in the butt. Now, when we're talking the 10-day gestation period, the reason for the 15-day soaks is because when you do the very first soak, let's say that adult had just laid eggs. Well, 10 days later, here's where that cycle of insanity comes in with snake mites, and they say, well, I killed all the mites and I got mites again. And it's usually 10 to 15 days later that they start seeing them, and that's because the eggs were hatching from the adults that laid them that was killed, okay? So now, what you do is every single day for 15 days straight, you soak those animals for a couple of hours. Don't put your housing items back in there. Do not set that enclosure back up every doggone day, because every day you're going to have to pull it back out, you're going to have to re-cure it, you're going to have to re-cleanse it. Easiest thing for your enclosure is to be able to just clean your enclosure down, leave the enclosure the way that it is. If you have to put your animal back in that enclosure, if you have a spare enclosure, then keep it in something separate. If you want to set your habitat back up, that's fine. But until you know for a fact you have gotten rid of the snake mites, you don't want to put them back in something like this to have to re-break all this back down just to deal with mites every single day. So 15-day soaking process, okay? 1 to 2 hours. Make sure to clean the habitat each day. Make sure to pre-treat around the habitat. And understand that a lot of the bedding that you get, a lot of the bedding that we utilize, even from pet stores, okay, I want you to understand this. From pet stores, the aspen bedding, the Reptibark a lot of the times, especially aspen bedding, cypress mulch, which we love to use. We love to use cypress mulch here in the zoo, but it can create mites here as well. So there's a few ways of dealing with that. Now there's 2 ways that you can do that. If you take those 20-pound bags of cypress mulch, you take the aspen, you take the Reptibark, you take whatever the case may be, okay? Pine shavings. Some people use the pine shavings even though you don't want it to be actual pine resin. Cedar is very bad, very, very bad. Of course, most of you guys know that. Pine is not as bad, and if you're talking just the simple pine bedding, most of the time it's no harm, no foul, no big deal, because there's no actual pine resin that's typically on there, none of that sticky resin. But let's say you use that. Mites can come from any of this stuff. You can still do 2 processes of elimination to try and help yourself with that because it's untreated wood. One is absolutely, you take that and put it in bins, put it in the oven, and 200 degrees for 2 hours, and you can cook those and essentially kill off all the parasites that's on them. Another way to do it is freezing them. Let's say you have a deep freezer, okay? You have a deep freezer, or you have this big upright freezer. You can take those bags of that stuff, stick them in there, leave them in there, and this is pre-treatment. This, you're talking several weeks beforehand. You take and you stick them in there, and you put them into a deep freeze. It'll freeze everything in there. So whenever you pull it back out and you're ready to start thawing it out, and you're ready to put it in there, the freeze or the intense cold has killed anything that was living on there as well. So there's a couple of ways of curing your process. Again, the quickest, most fastest way is cooking. 200 degrees, 2 hours, and it's cured, okay? That's a simple process. It's an easy process. And most of the time, even with bags of different types of bedding, it's not hard for you to find some kind of a pie pan or something that you can just put the amount that you want to put on there, stick it in there. Because most enclosures are not as big as things like this, or our king cobra's habitat or something like that, where we're having to put 3 or 4 bags in at one time. Yeah, that's a lot to have to try and shove in an oven. But if you're talking a simple 20-gallon or 40 breeder or an Exoterra upright, or you're talking even a 55, 75, or 110, and a 110-gallon tank, we could do a half a bag of cypress mulch in a 110-gallon tank and do a light layer across the bottom. And so there you go. So even think about it. It's not going to take much to be able to put into your oven, cook it down real quick, cure it real quick, and then put you a nice layer in the bottom. Now, with mites, with reptile mites or with lizard mites, those little guys are red. Understand, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, most of your mites are pretty host specific. Lizard mites go to lizards, snake mites go to snakes, but it all comes from the same general concept. It comes from untreated housing items. Let's simplify this down. Untreated housing items, dirty, moist environments in general, or transfer from something that already had mites. Okay, that's where your mites are going to come from. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to come from either a warm, moist environment, like dirty, wet bedding, or even just wet bedding that was not taken care of, or it's going to come from housing items, bedding items that was untreated. That's the number one way that you're going to end up with snake mites. Okay, now, guys, this is a short version of snake mites. Where do they come from? Some simple ways to deal with them. As far as issues being caused by them, there's no real scientific proof that they really cause any issues other than, of course, blood loss, massive amounts of blood loss if they're literally covered in mites. If you're not sure if you have mites, one of the quickest, easiest ways to know for sure, just take your hand, do this number right here, look at your hand. If you have something moving, you got mites. If you don't, you're clear. It's just that simple. If you're ever curious, okay? Now, this is Chad again with the Reptile Rangers. We're here at the Kernersville Reptile Zoo and Medical Center. We want to thank you for coming along with us, and we want to thank you for your input. We want to thank you for watching us over and over, your support. We hope to see you either at the zoo or on the next episode. Make sure you go subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Keep track with us. Write us in. Let us know if there's anything additional that you want to see or what you want us to film about. We have people doing it all the time. We look forward to seeing you soon. Later.